Right, welcome back. I think we've got two, Tiatiawa won't be here. They will be with us on the 7th. We've got Ngahapu, Otaki, and Ngāti Toa.
Kia ora, Kirsten and Denise. If Ngahapu or Otaki would like to do their presentation.
Tēnā tātou. Could I just slightly change arrangements? We had a brief discussion with our whanaunga of Ngāti Toa, and we're happy for them to start from the south, and then we'll move north to us in Otaki, if that's okay, if that meets with Council's approval today.
I can see a very strategic pincer movement starting up, but that's all good.
Tēnā koe. Tēnā koe kuru.
Yes, please do.
Kei te pai. Kia koe. Naomi.
Kia ora, can you hear me okay?
Aye.
Oh, tēnā tātou. Nei rā te mihi atu ki a koutou katoa. Kia ora everyone. Ko wai au, ko Naomi Solomon tōku ingoa he urio no Ngāti Toa. My name's Naomi, and I am from Ngāti Toa, and I am here to speak on behalf of Ngāti Toa today. So kia ora, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you on Te Tupu Pai. Going well. I actually don't have a lot to say today, other than I guess we're at a time in our development as a country and as an iwi, where housing's become a real issue for our people, and we understand that growth and development is necessary for us to both achieve our aspirations as a people, but also because our people need places to live, basically, and they can't meet their other I guess housing plays a really important role in the well-being of people, and so we definitely see this growth strategy as being something that helps to facilitate that. What I want to touch on in particular was around what working alongside iwi in the development and growth of the Kāpiti Coast could and should look like, because for a long time, often cities and subdivisions and places where people live and work and develop and build has taken place in the absence of really meaningful discussions with iwi, and often in places that as mana whenua we may not have necessarily wanted developed or there may have been things that we knew about certain parts of our environment that may have warned against developing in certain places. And I guess what I'm getting to there is that I think that that's because engagement with iwi hasn't always been the best that it could be, and so that's why I'm, I guess, quite pleased to see that in this particular document there is some really good reference to working with mana whenua to aroha mai. There's some really good references in the document to working with mana whenua in partnership to see, you know, to understand what's the wording it talks about. Working with iwi and mana whenua to, sorry, I had the piece of paper in front of me and I've just put it somewhere else. Yeah, I guess what working together looks like as the strategy is developed and implemented. And so for us, really, it's good to see that those words are there, but what it comes down to at the end of the day is how that's implemented and what that looks like on the ground. Because it's one thing to say the words, but actually it should be about walking the talk. And so for Ngāti Toa in particular, we've got huge aspirations for development right across Arohe. And as iwi grow in their development journeys, what that looks like in the relationship that we might have with council over time will naturally evolve, and it will change. And what it looks like now in 2021 is not what it looked like in 10 years ago, and it's not what it's going to look like in another 10 years. And so I guess for me that's probably a message around engagement with iwi and what working with mana whenua in partnership actually looks like. There needs to be some real agility around that, so that it can evolve and adapt as we need to as we grow. And I guess the only other point really is along those same lines. There's this, I suppose, dichotomy where when it comes to growth and development, often you've got kind of council on one side writing the plan and developers on the other side kind of reading the plan, or you know, having to apply the plan, and then growth happens. For iwi, as we grow and develop, we actually have a role to play on both of those spaces, and that's not something that's well understood across Aotearoa, because the system's set up that you're either one or the other. But for iwi, we're not one or the other, we're one and the same, and I think that councils can probably understand that in relation to some of their own developments, and how sometimes planning rules can get in the way of development opportunities for council just as much as they can for anybody. But I guess understanding that from an iwi perspective is definitely something that we're quite keen to work with council on to better understand. And then I guess the only other thing really that I wanted to say in relation to the document was that we're supportive of the vision, and like the fact that it seems to have taken, quite a concerted effort to really take on board the views of the community. And the other part that we're kind of really supportive of in that is just the place of the tile and all of that. because I guess when it comes down to it, I guess one of the things that is often discussed here is that at the end of the day, doesn't matter what you build and grow if you don't have a planet to live on and a planet to sustain the people. So we're quite supportive of the parts in the document that talk to protecting our environment and open spaces. I'm just double checking that I don't have anything kind of additional to say. I guess there is some stuff there around all of the different kind of national policy statements, regional growth type kind of documentation, and you've got your RMA reforms, your Three Waters reform, all of that stuff going on in the system, and that's all going to have an impact here. I guess the thread that I'd pull on in that is that all of those things have a specific Māori dimensional element to them, and they're all things that are related, but they all take time and effort and understanding in order for them to be implemented meaningfully. And so I guess the reason I'm raising that is because these will all be parts of the discussion and the ongoing relationship that we will need to have with Council in order to ensure that implementation of this growth strategy and then the coming district plan are actually going to meet our aspirations as well. And I guess I'll leave it at that. Kia ora.
Thank you. Do you want to wait until the others are presented, or you want ready for any questions?
Oh, I'm happy for Denise to present, and then we can take questions at the end.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Kia ora tātou, tēnā tātou, koutou ki te tēpu, kudu, koutou te kaunihira, a tēnā koutou katoa. Tēnā koe Naomi, I whakai ki taku tono I te mutunga, I te muniti whakamutunga. Tēnā koe. Thank you all. I'm assuming that you all have Ngā Hapu or Taki's paper in front of you. And I'm not going to go through our paper at all. I'm just going to, like Naomi, just reiterate a number of positions and statements that Ngā Hapu have been quite consistent with over time at the various discussions and meetings we've had the opportunity to share with Council in recent months. So I guess firstly, if you read our paper in the front page, it says he taonga te aku ringa. And for us here at Ngā Hapu Ōtaki, those taonga refer to the gifts of our ancestors, who in their time moved pretty strategically as they traversed the country from the north boundary of Raukwa, Waikato down here to Ōtaki, down to Ōtaki. And they did that with a strong alliance with the iwi that we that continue to whanaungatanga and work collaboratively together in terms of Ngāti Tō Rangatira, Tatiawa and Ngāti Raukwa ki te tonga. Ngā Hapu Ōtaki are 5 of the 23 hapu that make up Ngāti Raukwa ki te tonga. But for our little patch, we could call it, that spreads from Kukutawaki in the south to Pukehou Hill in the north, we have a little patch of ground that our people and our tupuna took residence on way back in the early 1800s. And I don't want to spend a lot of time going down history, but it's always relevant to us because it determines how we should behave in the future and the sort of things we should take care of and ensure that the resources that we're given, we learn to look after them and we grow them because they have to last for another 5, 10, 20 generations. And we only have what we have. We don't have any more. So we have to look after that like council and make sure that it's going to be there for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 generations of our people. And that's quite a heavy task to have, but we'll do the best we can, and we hope council will support us and ensure that we all do the best we can with the resources we have. So our taonga talk about our tupuna and what they've left for us here in Otaki, and that doesn't just refer to land, it refers to the culture, the history, the reo, the homesteads we have, the land we live on, the land we can continue to call ours in Otaki. And that's really important to us. So when we talk about growth here and growth here in Otaki, it needs to be grounded. I know Ngāti Toa in an earlier discussion with them today, we talked about a kaupapa framework. Now I've got to say, I'm not blowing anyone's trumpet, but Te Wānanga Raukwa devised a fantastic self-auditing process where tikanga Māori determined and was able to determine and measure us on how well we perform. Yeah, te ao Māori, how well we perform with one another, with other partners, with the people who come in to take up the resources we can provide to them and the opportunities. So when we look at that framework and we apply it to anything we do in the growth of our whenua, that will always tell us if we follow it, we can't go wrong. We couldn't possibly step out of line. We couldn't possibly miss one another out and not be inclusive in everything we do. So I urge the council to go back to that framework and have a look at the design that's been put into the papers by our 3 iwi, by the Art Confederation. And if there's any further discussion, we're happy to come and talk about that kaupapa framework. It's something that the Crown agencies that work with our entities here in Otaki look forward to. They have adapted it. They know how to follow it. They know how to measure it. They can come and undertake their role for the Crown agencies and apply our metrics. And we can come to an agreement at the end of those discussions and those auditing process. That's pretty important. So if we were to apply that metrics to our process on where we are now in terms of our urban growth, there's probably some areas there that we may not have hit the ball, so to speak, hit it on the head, hit the nail on the head in some areas. So there's always room for improvement, people. There always is, even amongst ourselves as we as Māori and mana whenua continue to work through that. It's an ongoing learning process. And as we all know, the process of learning never ends. So I encourage us to look at that and to identify those principles that are embedded in our tikanga and in those kaupapa that say to us, if we talk about rangatiratanga, that's about partnership. And partnership means that, equality, 50 for you, 50 for me. A good model of that is the Mihingaru model, the Raukwa Anglican Church model, where the Anglican Church, after hundreds and hundreds of years of being embedded in a single process, in a single legal process, they agreed to split their arrangements and the management and the oversight and the overview of the Anglican Church in New Zealand 3 ways. And so they gave recognition to the Māori House, the Tikanga Māori House. They gave recognition to the Pacifica Island House, and we also gave recognition to the Pākehā House. And we stand equally when we stand at the table or sit at the table and talk about the things that can help us and our people of the Anglican Church as we move forward. This is not a church sermon. This is just a model that has worked in a pretty archaic environment and society, and it's worked for us, and it continues to work. There's always room to grow. So I just want to raise that's part of that kaupapa. The other part is to encourage our I know local government essentially work to the tune of central government, and quite often, recently anyway, we've had the opportunity to identify that central government need to take a step back and engage closer with mana whenua. Now, a week ago at a meeting at the council chambers there with representatives of those Crown agencies, they heard that very loud and clear, and they have agreed to go back to their table, to their ministers, to their agencies, and redesign, I guess, the script and the mahere, the plan in which they were going to come out and work with us as mana whenua. That was encouraging. That was really encouraging. So we look forward to that. In terms of a treaty partnered approach to managing growth, I think it's important that, in 1860, when our people gave lands, in some cases didn't give the lands, the Crown took the lands for housing and other public works, etc. For us in Otaki, those lands still sit in the hands of the Crown, especially with state housing New Zealand, kāinga order, and we still have no say into those housing, whether they're sold or whether they're made available to people for rental housing. But right now, our Otaki people are homeless in their hometown, and that's sad. We have the capacity to change that, and we hope the council will work with us to do that. The other part of the urban growth is that the plan, I don't know who did it, we don't know who did it, but the plans that we've looked at today clearly identify that the significant land mass that has been identified as being able to make a substantial contribution to the urban growth, especially in housing development in Otaki. The larger percentage of all those lands is Māori land. That's been marked on the map without a consultation with mana whenua. I'll leave that with council to address and to come back to us on that one. There are discussions in there on the types of things we would hope for. I think the other one is just to say that to date we have enjoyed the opportunity to be at the table with council. We appreciate the efforts council are doing in terms of ensuring that there is clearly a two-way conversation going on at all times. What is challenging, though, is for us as mana whenua who do other things up here in our hometowns and at home, not necessarily sit here and just wear one hat. We wear multiple hats. And so to be able to give some of these work streams, certainly the 120% that's required, we find ourselves short in people to be able to meet the demands of council. Where we ask for more time, that's not an intentional purpose just to delay the process, but it is important that our people can come to terms and can understand fully the proposed plans that are before them and how it will affect them and their children and their grandchildren. That's really important. And that can't be had in a one-day hui, it can't be had in a two-week hui. It just takes a fair bit of time. We have endeavoured to ensure that that information and all the information that's been shared with us to date has been shared. I think in terms of mana whenua aspirations, our aspirations are clearly defined in our documents. Our hope and desire is that we get to live with our environment, not on it, not in it. We've stated that before in other forums. We hope that the urban growth and the designs, the urban designers and the environmental engineers that are doing the plans certainly have living buildings in mind, where new development has the most minimal impact possible on our landscape, on our whenua, and on our infrastructure. It takes a brave person to do that because it's quite a lengthy process. We know that Te Whanau has just embarked on that with our living buildings projects here at Te Whanau that will roll out over the next 5 years. The other one would be in terms of conclusion. I think in conclusion, we'd just like to look at the growth principles that have come from council and I guess from local government and central government, all the way regional government, local government, I should say, in terms of the approach that's been taken. We understand the time constraints that council have, like I've just mentioned earlier, and the processes as they roll out. Our concern is that we take on the work and we undertake it in a rushed manner, and we don't do the best we possibly can, and we don't have room for mistakes. We don't have room for error when we're talking about the next 2 to 3 generations. We have to get it right. And if I think about the way our people strategize when they move from one end of the country to another, and to ensure their survival in Otaki here, their strategies were rock solid and sound. They didn't move hastily. They didn't rush they didn't dance to the tune of other people's drums, but they danced to the tune of their own heartbeats and the voice of their people. And we continue to enjoy the fruits of their work in Otaki. We have a Māori education community here that made a substantial contribution to our to our community, to the Kāpiti Coast and to other parts of the country. And that again has been on the backbone of our people who saw education as the key for us and our generations to come in the future. We stand with that. We hope that Council will take the time to read our paper, and I welcome any questions. Tēnā tātou.
Kia ora. Question time. Anybody up for any questions? Councillor McCann.
It's not really a question, and thank you so much for the submission. It's really more of an observation that you have outlined to us that we're under some time constraints and we're entering into a process, and obviously this is just part of the process and we're not making decisions at the moment. So I just want to reaffirm that those discussions will be ongoing. Do you see, and this is a question, do you see some contradictions where I see in the submission there are suggestions that we shouldn't be going up, and yet we're sort of locked into that regardless of whether we wanted to with the government's proposed bill, and with our growing world strategy we're trying to avoid just growing outwards. If we don't intensify, and we're talking about intensification that is built well, sustainable, good for families and whānau, do you see that there's a contradiction with people wanting the way it was, and yet the numbers don't stack up in terms of actually finding enough homes for people?
Kia ora, tēnā koe. I think it depends whose version of growing well we're talking about. That's the first comment. The other part is that urban development and further growth in Otaki has to be with the owners of those Māori lands, because they own the majority of the remaining land in Otaki unless you go south to Hautere. But the volume of lands available that are Māori owned when you go north of Otaki are all Māori owned. Those people will determine, and the owners of that land will determine how that land is developed. When we talk about good housing, all the developments that are happening in Otaki, and we're relatively familiar with them all in terms of urban development. One of the comments I conveyed to and shared with council staff and some of the meetings we've held to date, and there have been numerous, is that what we need to avoid and what we won't agree to on our lands in Otaki, which would be some 30 acres, some big blocks of land. Tasman Road is Māori-owned land. To develop that, we have to come to an agreement on how that's going to be developed. The owners are unlikely to agree to anything that's going to go over 2 or 3 story. We've made that very clear to the representatives that have met with us to date. We know what the Crown are asking for, but at the end of the day, at the moment, if we continue to do that, we continue to push our people out and open the doors for other people to come into our home. And if we own the land, we should have the right to live on it and build it to whatever level we choose to. And you're talking about hundreds of remaining, thousands of acres still sit in Otaki that are owned by Māori. Council has tagged those as urban intensified dwellings. That includes Te Wānanga, which is currently a tertiary institution. It includes the pockets of land around Angiatia Church that should not be on that map. It includes other areas which are currently occupied by our kura kaupapa and our kura aiwi. So it's disturbing when we see our Māori lands clearly targeted by central government, local government, as land available for intensified urban dwelling. We've said our big block in Anzac Parade will not go any higher than 2 stories, and we hold fast to that, or it will be drawn. It will be withdrawn.
Thank you for highlighting that. I just wonder if there's some more work that we in council need to do, and with yourselves, because it's my understanding is that those areas enable you as the landowner to go up, not insist that you have to. Am I correct, staff? So that the staff was nodding yes. So it's probably we need to make sure that we're communicating that better, because it's giving you the opportunity as landowners to go up, not saying that you have to.
Thank you for that. That would be really. We welcome the opportunity to have those discussions.
And I look forward to chatting in the near future. And thank you very much for this.
Thank you. Kia ora.
Denise, I have a question. You touched on capacity. Looking at the process you've undergone so far, what the consultation document has done is reveal two things. One is the issue of development and resource consent applications and communications between council and developers and landowners, which is a sort of business as usual, which occurs without the governance side, the councillors knowing anything about it, because it is everyday business for the management. What has happened since the consultation document has gone up is that some of the people involved in this are starting to put their hands up and engaging through submissions, so we get to know which are these developments that are happening, which we didn't know about. And also, the document has stimulated other landowners who are looking at opportunity to engage with this process. And what we are seeing also is a number of those people realizing that the nature of the land and the type of development they want to do in the environment needs some comprehensive engagement with mana whenua. And given you have raised the issue of capacity, I'm seeing that the demand from the private sector and also council through this process is going to increase, or already starting to increase now. Are you familiar with what's happening? Are there any ways in which this can be sorted? Because I understand that the Maori way of consulting, taking time and having internal conversations is critical. At the same time, we have this upsurge in pressure, which is part of the development pressure, I suppose. Do you recognize this? If you do, what do you think is a solution for this sector?
Tēnā koe, Mr. Mayor, I don't have a solution right now, but I'd have to say that, you know, the opportunity to sit and engage or have a discussion or to share mana whenua's position on a number of the developments. There'll be a range of varying reasons why developers whose plans are already with council or whose plans are about to go to council, and all of those developers have been in recent meetings to date talking about their specific developments, etc., and how to do that. We understand that there's going to be some challenges with every single development project, housing project, to be able to meet the living building requirements, because they're quite stringent and they're very detailed and they require a lot of work. Some of the land that's being used for development, we know the lands in Ōtaki, they're the flood prone. We have the worst, so we sort of are familiar with working with them. I think it's looking at to ensure that there's consideration in some regards for them to do the best they can to ensure that the dwellings and the developments they're creating, the housing, whether it's multiple story or single level, is going to be far more cognizant, I guess, Mr. Mayor, in terms of the land they're building out. Now, we know that Rangiuru Road, has a high water level. Anything on Tasman Road has a high water level. Seawater comes right up to underneath Rangiatia Church and in our urupa. So as Māoris, we know that because we know how often we've dug the grounds and there's seawater not far below surface level. So we understand that. I don't know that all the developers have. They'll get their engineers and we know that engineers can work miracles. We've seen that. We've had schematics done for us that show that we can turn our very flood-prone farmlands on Tasman Road into beautiful subdivisions with some really clever, what you call it, hydrology and engineering. We know that, but ultimately over time, there will be some serious issues with housing over there. If we were to just go straight into an example would be the northwestern block of our northern farm, where the Mangapodi and the Waitohu streams merge. Any housing there, which is like at the back of Dodge Crescent, is going to be prone to severe flooding. So we would welcome the opportunity to discuss it. In some cases, it may be too hard to mitigate, but we would welcome the opportunity. We have a reasonable level of expertise. We just don't have the numbers to be able to be at the table. But we have been requested to date, several occasions, on a number of occasions, and still are being requested to participate in cultural impact programs, reports on a number of the housing developments. We've done those today. We've met with them, and in all every project and subdivision that we've had a chance to have an engagement with the developer, we've worked out a way forward and things have progressed.
Very good. Thank you for that, Councillor Hanford.
Tina korua Denise and Naomi's ko Sophie Hanford tōkuinga.
Tina koe Sophie.
I have a question just relating to the Te Kaupapa Matua framework and how kind of well and meaningfully you feel like that's been integrated into this proposed approach to growth. If you could just expand on that a little bit more, how meaningfully you feel the framework's been used.
Well, Sophie, you probably got me a little bit unawares. In terms of us, in terms of the framework, every time Ngā Hapu o Taki writes up a plan, the framework and those key kaupapa down the side are there. So everything we do has to measure up to that, Sophie, for us. It's an ongoing process of education and sharing and even encouraging our people and bringing our people to a level where they themselves have a good understanding in terms of how this applies in the way we live. It's not something that we can do today and not do tomorrow. It's not something that you turn on and turn off. Tikanga is tikanga. It applies wherever we go, whoever we're sitting at the table with, and whatever we do. It's not something we can turn on and turn off. And I think when we get, and sometimes we can get to a situation where I call it, it's like a tuki-tuki, where we can't come together and we can't agree because today's plan for someone else is going to be totally different to tomorrow. Whereas for us as Māori, it's not necessarily the same, but the same principles must apply as we keep moving forward. Does that help, Sophie?
Yeah, kia ora, that does help. I wonder if Naomi or someone from Ngāti Toa would want to add.
Sure, absolutely.
Kia ora, Denise.
Kia ora. I guess whether or not it holds up is what am I saying there? I think you can read the document how you want to read it, and I think it goes back to the point that Denise raised around our tikanga is our tikanga, and it lives with us wherever we go, and you don't get to pick or choose. But alongside that comes with people's kind of development and understanding as well, and so somebody who has really deep knowledge of our values will see the shortcomings compared to someone who doesn't necessarily have as deeper understanding, and will think that it's marvellous and everything's wonderful and rainbows and unicorns because they don't understand the depth and they don't necessarily understand I suppose any shortcomings. And so I think that overall it's probably getting there. And as we continue to work together in partnership, that's how we'll develop the depth.
Good point.
Anybody else? Doesn't seem like we've got any more questions. can I say we appreciate the time that you've taken to engage with us. Thank you so much.
Tēnā koe, tēnā koutou. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kāpiti.
Right. Next is, Tina Pope is cancelled. Trudy Burney, transfer. She's on Zoom. Anybody else hanging around? Paul Turner might be there. Well, there's nobody around. Unless you want to sing a song. I intended to announce it. Yeah.